Jungkook dropped to his knees after Jimin's words. ARMY sobbed together. Don't lie to them anymore, Jungkook. Tell them what you did. The stage lights had dimmed, but his world blacked out entirely. Jungkook stood motionless in the middle of the empty stadium, the echoes of 100,000 cheers now replaced by one voice that split him open like lightning through glass. His knees buckled, not from pain, not from exhaustion, but from the unbearable weight of truth being forced into the light. Rain pelted the rooftop of the concert dome above them, and the silence between them screamed louder than any encore. Jimin's face was pale, jaw clenched, his hand trembling slightly at his side. The space between them was no longer filled with the energy of brothers who had built an empire together. It was a battlefield, and Jungkook had no armor left. The arena was empty, post-show cleanup still underway. A lone stage technician in the distance glanced over but kept moving, perhaps sensing something sacred and violent unraveling. The smell of sweat, rain, and leftover pyrotechnic smoke lingered in the air, acrid and heavy. Jungkook's eyes were wide, lips parted slightly as if the confession Jimin demanded was already on the tip of his tongue. But nothing came, just a soft, choked breath. Then the sound of his knees hitting the stage, a sharp, dull thud. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, Jungkook whispered, more to the silence than to Jimin. But Jimin had heard enough excuses in the past week to fill a lifetime. You promised me, promised all of us. Was that just for the cameras too? Jungkook looked up. His eyes weren't just red, they were hollowed. Like someone had reached inside and stolen something vital from him. His fingers curled into fists against the floor, and with a tremble, he let out a broken laugh that held no humor. There are things you don't know, Jimin, he said hoarsely. Things I didn't even know about myself until it was too late. Jimin stepped back like the words burned him. And now ARMY pays the price. The guilt twisted inside Jungkook like a knife. He remembered the fan letters, the late-night V-lives, the tearful thank yous, the trust, the love. He had built his life on those things, but secrets rot even in the brightest light, and his secret had festered long enough. A week earlier, he had received the message, unmarked, a single sentence, "We know what happened in Busan." He hadn't returned home since. Jimin had confronted him with photos, texts, names. It had all spiraled into this moment, this reckoning. And still, Jungkook didn't speak the whole truth. Not yet. The pain in Jimin's eyes wasn't anger. It was heartbreak. And that was the worst part. They stood there, idol and brother, betrayer and betrayed, on the very stage where dreams were made. Now, it felt like the wreckage of everything they had bled for. A low rumble of thunder rolled overhead, muffled by the dome, but felt deep in the bones. I protected you, Jimin said, barely above a whisper. I fought for you when no one else would. I believed in you. Jungkook looked up slowly, eyes brimming. I never asked you to. You didn't have to. We were family. The finality in Jimin's voice struck harder than any accusation. It was a farewell wrapped in truth. And Jungkook realized, with aching clarity, that some betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people you swore would never leave. Behind them, a giant LED screen flickered briefly, replaying fan footage from earlier. Jungkook's smiling face, Jimin's laughter, a time before everything fell apart. The echo of cheers from earlier still clung faintly to the air, like ghosts refusing to let go. Jungkook lowered his head. I don't know how to fix this. Jimin shook his head, a bitter smile playing on his lips. It's not about fixing it anymore. It's about surviving what comes next. As he turned to walk away, the sound of his footsteps on the stage felt like the closing of a door that would never open again. Jungkook remained where he was, on his knees, drenched in regret and the echo of a brother's final words. And above them, outside, the storm broke fully. You shouldn't be here, Taehyung. Taehyung's voice rang low and tight through the hallway of the HYBE building, his frame blocking the recording studio door as Jimin stood just inches away, soaked from the rain. His hair clung to his forehead, his breath shallow. Jimin didn't flinch. Move. Taehyung's jaw tensed. He's not okay. And I'm not here to comfort him. The silence between them was thunderous. Behind the door, muffled through glass and distance, the faint throb of a piano could be heard. Jungkook was inside, alone, writing. What nobody knew. Maybe an apology, maybe a confession. Maybe just noise to drown out the chaos outside and within. Jimin pushed past Taehyung without waiting for approval. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Dim lights illuminated the corners of the studio, casting long shadows. Jungkook didn't look up from the piano, fingers moving like ghosts across the keys. But the moment Jimin stepped in, the notes faltered, spiraled into discord, and then silence. "So you came," Jungkook said softly, his back still turned. Jimin's voice was colder than before. "You think hiding here with a melody and guilt will fix what you did?" Jungkook stood, slowly, carefully, as if the room might collapse if he moved too fast. "I needed to think." "Think," Jimin laughed, dry, bitter, ugly. "You had years to think, and you waited until a stranger sent you that message to even start." "I didn't know how to tell anyone." Jimin stepped forward, eyes glinting. "Try me." For a moment, Jungkook's mask cracked. His hand trembled as he picked up a USB from the console table nearby. It was worn, dented, clearly handled too many times. He held it out toward Jimin. This has everything." Jimin hesitated, then snatched it from his hand. "What is it?" "Proof of what happened, of who helped cover it up, of who else knew." Jimin's lips parted. Who else? The silence that followed was not hesitant. It was dangerous. "They made me sign an NDA." "They," Jimin's voice rose. "You mean someone inside knew?" Jungkook only nodded. Jimin stepped back like he'd been slapped. Jesus Christ. A flash of memories passed through Jimin's mind. Meetings, smiles, rehearsals, interviews, all under the guise of unity, of family, of safety. And yet, somewhere among them, someone had known, had watched Jungkook drown and said nothing. "Why?" Jimin asked, almost a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me then?" "Because you were the only one I couldn't lie to. And if I had to say it out loud to you, I'd break." The admission was raw. And for a second, Jimin saw the boy he had grown up with, the kid who slept on a dorm floor, who cried in practice rooms, who always looked for him in the crowd. But that image shattered under the weight of betrayal. "So you let them own the truth instead," Jimin said, voice like cut glass. "You protected your silence while we all stood beside you like fools." "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did." Jungkook looked at him then, eyes bloodshot, voice low. "Do you think I sleep at night?" The question hung in the air, broken, final. Outside the glass walls, the corridor lights flickered. Taehyung had stayed, his silhouette visible like a statue, watching, waiting. "Does Namjoon know?" Jimin asked, voice shaking now. Jungkook's pause was answer enough. Jimin laughed again, this time softer, more in disbelief than anger. And he said nothing. Jungkook sat back down at the piano, his shoulders heavy. He said protecting the music was more important than protecting the myth. The sentence cracked something in Jimin. He dropped the USB to the floor with a clatter. "We're not gods," he said. "We bleed, and we break, and so do the people who believe in us." Jungkook closed his eyes. "I know." Jimin walked toward the door, but just as he reached it, he stopped, his back still to Jungkook. "They'll come for you. Once this is out, you're not just the youngest. You're the liability." "I know." Jimin turned his head slightly. "Then be ready, because once this burns, it won't just be you who gets scorched." The door shut behind him with a soft click, and Jungkook sat in silence, the shadows of the studio growing longer. He reached for the piano again, but this time, his hands wouldn't move. His fingers hovered above the keys, paralyzed. Because now the music wasn't enough. Now, the reckoning had begun. "You leaked it." The accusation cut through the conference room like a blade. Namjoon didn't raise his voice, but the stillness in his posture was far more terrifying than anger. Jungkook stood at the far end of the long glass table, hands clenched behind his back, eyes fixed on the city skyline beyond the window as if escape might be etched somewhere between the buildings. I didn't, Jungkook said quietly. If I had, it wouldn't look like this. Jimin slammed his palm against the table. The sound echoed sharp and final. Don't play semantics. Someone talked. And suddenly ARMY knows half a story that's rotting without context. Yoongi, seated near the window, finally looked up from his phone. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was not. This isn't a leak. It's a warning shot. Taehyung exhaled slowly, arms crossed. From who? Yoongi's gaze flicked to Jungkook. The same people who made him sign that NDA. The room shifted. The air felt heavier, like it had thickened around their lungs. Namjoon closed his eyes for a moment, rubbing the bridge of his nose. When he spoke again, his voice cracked, not with weakness but exhaustion. I told them we'd handle it internally. Jimin's head snapped toward him. So you did know. Namjoon met his gaze without flinching. I knew there was an incident. I didn't know how deep it went. That's not good enough, Jimin said, voice shaking. You let us stand in front of millions and smile while this was buried under us. I was trying to protect everyone, Namjoon replied. And who protected him? Jimin gestured sharply at Jungkook. Silence followed, not denial, not defense. Jungkook finally turned around. Stop, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. This is on me. Jimin stared at him, incredulous. You're still doing it, taking the fall so everyone else can breathe. Because it was my choice, Jungkook snapped, emotion finally spilling over. I made the decision that night. I trusted the wrong people. I stayed quiet. I thought if I endured it alone, it would disappear. Yoongi leaned forward. Nothing disappears, it just mutates. Jungkook swallowed hard. I was scared, he admitted. Not of losing fame, not of backlash. I was scared that if ARMY knew the truth, they'd see me differently. That they'd look at me and see weakness instead of strength. Jimin's voice softened despite himself. They already see your weakness. They love you anyway. Jungkook laughed bitterly. Do they, or do they love the version I show them? The question lingered, heavy and uncomfortable. Taehyung finally spoke. The narrative is out of our control now. Blogs are speculating. Clips are being dissected. Every silence looks like guilt. Namjoon straightened. Then we stop being silent. Everyone turned to him. I'm calling a press conference, he continued. No scripts, no filters. We tell the truth, what we can legally say, and we stop pretending this is just another storm. Jimin's breath hitched. You realize what that does to the image. Namjoon nodded. I know exactly what it does. It destroys the illusion. Jungkook stepped forward, eyes shining. I'll speak. Jimin looked at him sharply. Are you sure? No, Jungkook replied, but I'm done hiding. Yoongi stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. Once you say it out loud, there's no taking it back. I don't want to, Jungkook said. Another silence followed, this one different, not hostile, resigned, honest. Hours later, Jungkook stood alone in a dressing room, staring at his reflection. His face looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted behind his eyes. He pressed his palms against the counter, grounding himself, breathing through the tremor in his chest. A soft knock broke the moment. Jimin entered, without waiting for permission. I'm not here to forgive you, he said immediately. Jungkook nodded. I didn't expect you to. Jimin stepped closer, voice low. But I am here to stand with you when this breaks open. Jungkook looked up, eyes glassy. You don't have to. I know, Jimin replied. That's why it matters. They stood there, not embracing, not apologizing, just sharing the weight of what was coming. Outside, the building buzzed with anticipation, unaware that the story about to be told would change everything. Not because it was perfect, but because it was finally real. The cameras were already rolling when Jungkook stepped into the press room. The space, though clinically designed with clean white walls and polished floors, buzzed with something primal, an undercurrent of anticipation, hunger, and bloodlust wrapped in the thin veil of journalistic professionalism. Flashes exploded the moment he appeared. Dozens of eyes widened behind glass lenses. Fingers hovered over record buttons. There was no intro, no scripted publicist statement. Just Jungkook walking up to the podium, swallowing against the dryness in his throat, and facing a world that had waited too long for a crack in his flawless exterior. "I won't be taking questions," he began, voice rough, unfiltered. "Not because I'm afraid, but because I've come to say what should have been said years ago." Every breath in the room stilled. He looked up, gaze unwavering. 3 years ago, I was involved in an incident in Busan. It wasn't a scandal, it wasn't a tabloid story. It was real. It changed my life. It endangered someone else's. And until now, no one knew, because I made sure they didn't. Someone at the back dropped a pen. The click echoed unnaturally loud. "I made a mistake," he said, breath-catching. "A night I thought I could outrun, and when it caught up to me, I didn't run, I hid. Behind contracts, behind the team, behind the silence they offered as protection." The whispers began then, low murmurs. Everyone was trying to do the math, connect dots that had long been buried. "I didn't speak out because I thought it would ruin everything we built. But the truth is, what we built was already cracked, and I kept smiling like it wasn't collapsing beneath us." Backstage, Jimin stood with his arms crossed, watching the screen. Taehyung beside him, hands trembling not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it all finally coming to light. Namjoon sat farther back, elbows on knees, silent, watching. "What happened in Busan wasn't an accident," Jungkook said. "I trusted someone I shouldn't have, someone who used my name to protect themselves after they hurt someone I cared about." Gasps rippled. Flashes clicked again, more frantic now. The narrative had twisted. This wasn't about Jungkook making a mistake. This was about betrayal from within. He paused. "And the worst part," he continued, voice cracking, "I didn't speak up, because I thought if I buried it deep enough, no one else would get hurt, but someone did." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter. "This is from her." He didn't read it. He placed it on the podium and let it sit there like an open wound. "She asked me to tell the truth, not for her, not for me, for every fan who gave us their hearts and never knew we were standing on a lie." In the audience, a woman in the second row started crying. Journalists had stopped typing. Everyone just listened. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I'm not asking for redemption. I just need to stop being silent." And with that, he stepped away. No handlers, no music, no cue, just an open door behind him and the echo of stunned silence. But outside the building, it was a different kind of noise. Fans, protesters, supporters, detractors. The crowd wasn't unified anymore. It was a chaos of tears, screams, signs, arguments. Some held banners that read, "We believe you, Jungkook." Others shouted through megaphones, demanding justice. Security struggled to contain the growing hysteria as words spread like wildfire across social media platforms, clipping his speech into viral sound bites. Behind closed doors, HYBE executives sat in an emergency meeting. Their faces were pale, their expressions unreadable. "He detonated the brand," one said. "No," the CEO replied quietly, tapping a finger against the table. "He made it human." But not everyone agreed. Later that night, Jungkook returned to the dorm. He opened the door and found Jimin sitting alone on the couch, scrolling through his phone. The screen reflected in his eyes, comments, reactions, hashtags both praising and crucifying them. "You didn't have to read that," Jungkook said. "I needed to," Jimin replied, "to see the world you chose to walk back into." Jungkook sat beside him, the silence between them thick and fragile. "She's going to come forward," he said. Jimin turned. "Are you ready for that?" "No," Jungkook admitted, "but I won't stop her." Jimin nodded slowly, then looked away. Taehyung was approached last week. A journalist offered him money for your old voice memos. They're going after all of us now. Jungkook sighed. "I never meant to drag you into this." Jimin's laugh was short. "You didn't drag me. I walked into the fire because I saw you burning alone." He stood, staring down at Jungkook. But if we're doing this, if you're tearing down everything, then you owe it to all of us to not stop halfway. Jungkook met his eyes. I won't. Then be prepared to bleed, Jimin said, because they won't care who you were, only who they thought you were. That night, the world changed. Not because a scandal had broken, but because an idol had stood before his kingdom, not as a god, but as a man, flawed, afraid, and finally unafraid to show it. And though the empire trembled beneath the weight of his truth, somewhere in the noise, millions watched and whispered, finally. You should have let it stay buried. The voice was calm, almost gentle, but the threat beneath it was unmistakable. Jungkook turned around slowly in the underground garage of the dorm, his heart hammering at the sound he hadn't heard in weeks. Standing by one of the black company vans, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding half his face despite the night, was Minhyuk, former head of HYBE's artist relations, and the man Jungkook had once trusted with everything. Jungkook's voice came low and razor-edged. You don't get to tell me what I should have done, not after what you did to her. Minhyuk stepped forward, shadows swallowing the edges of his frame. She made a choice, just like you made yours. I gave you a way out and you took it, and now you're playing the martyr. Jungkook's fists clenched. You threatened her, you manipulated me, you covered it up and made it look like an accident. I cleaned it up, Minhyuk snapped, dropping the calm facade. You would have lost everything. You were losing it. The kid who couldn't sleep without nightmares, who drank too much, disappeared between gigs, you weren't holding it together. I did that for you. No, Jungkook growled, stepping forward. You did that for the company, for the image, for the goddamn revenue streams. Minhyuk tilted his head, a mock smile curling. And look how well it worked, until now, until your guilt got louder than your loyalty. There was a pause, thick, breathless. She's not staying quiet anymore, Jungkook said, and neither am I. Minhyuk stepped so close their noses almost touched. His whisper was cold. You think you're the only one with secrets. Jungkook's eyes darkened. What's that supposed to mean? Minhyuk leaned in further. You just lit a match in a house full of gasoline, kid. You think you know everything that's been done to keep that stage spotless. You think your little truth is the only one that's going to shake the ground. Jungkook didn't flinch, then let it burn. Minhyuk's jaw tightened. You're going to regret this. But Jungkook was already walking away. He didn't turn back. Upstairs, chaos had settled into something eerily quiet. The group had gathered in the living room. Namjoon, Jimin, Taehyung, Yoongi, and Hoseok. They'd all seen the footage. They'd all read the waves of think pieces. They were no longer guessing if this would be a scandal. It already was. But what none of them had expected was the leak that dropped just hours after Jungkook's press conference. A video. Pixelated, shaky, but unmistakably real. Jungkook's voice, years younger, crying, arguing, a girl's voice too, broken, frightened. And in the background, another voice, male, pressuring, familiar. Namjoon stood with a pale face, phone in hand. They just sent it to dispatch. It's trending already. Jungkook stepped inside, and the room froze. They're coming from inside, Yoongi said, tapping his temple. The leak, that audio, that was from your old phone. The one HYBE kept when they replaced your gear. They said it was for security, Jungkook muttered. Jimin looked at him like he'd been punched. You're telling me they had that video all this time and just kept it? They were waiting, Yoongi said, quiet and grim, in case you became a problem. Jungkook sat slowly, rubbing his face. They're trying to discredit her, make it look like a lover's fight, like it wasn't what it was. And the public, Taehyung asked. Namjoon hesitated. Split. Half are defending, half are calling her a liar, some are calling for the group to be suspended entirely. Silence again, like always, but not out of fear this time. Out of planning. We need to talk to her, Jimin said. She's not ready, Jungkook replied. Then we protect her until she is. Yoongi stood. We need legal. I already called my own team, Namjoon said. Not HYBE's, ours. There was something defiant in the room now. No longer just damage control, but rebellion, real rebellion. And it was messy and terrifying and not guaranteed to end well, but it was honest. For the first time in years, it was honest. Then Hoseok, who had been silent all evening, finally looked up. I got a call last night from someone inside the board. They're going to ask you to retract the statement, Jungkook. Make it sound like it was taken out of context. Apologize for confusion. No, Jungkook said immediately. They're going to threaten disbandment. I said no. Jimin nodded, resolute. If they try that, we'll go public. You sure about that? Taehyung asked, brows raised. Jimin's voice didn't waver. We're already burning. Might as well light the truth on fire, too. Later that night, Jungkook stood alone on the balcony, overlooking the glowing chaos of Seoul. The city didn't care who he was. It didn't care what was falling apart behind the glass. But somewhere out there, she was watching, hearing, waiting, and she deserved more than silence. His phone buzzed. An unknown number, one message. I'm ready to speak. H. Jungkook closed his eyes. The storm had only just begun. I need to know you're not doing this for me. Her voice trembled through the phone, fragile yet deliberate, echoing louder in Jungkook's ears than the traffic rushing outside the black SUV window. The city roared past as the car made its way to the discreet hotel in Gangnam where she had agreed, after all this time, to finally speak. I'm doing this because it's time, he answered. Not for you, not for the fans, for the truth. A pause. And if it ruins everything, then maybe everything wasn't worth saving. The call ended without goodbye. She never said goodbye. The lobby of the hotel was dimly lit, quiet, guarded by discreet private security. Jungkook entered alone, no stylists, no managers, no cameras. Just the weight of every decision he'd made pressing on his spine. She sat by the window, hood over her head, eyes shadowed beneath the low brim of her cap. When he approached, she didn't look up at first. He stopped beside her, unsure whether to speak. You aged, she said quietly. He gave a weak smile. I earned it. Finally, she looked at him, not with hatred, not even sorrow, but something far worse, emptiness. You left me to carry it alone, she said. I know. And now you want me to carry it again, but this time in front of the world. I'll be right next to you. Will you, she asked, because you've said that before. Jungkook sat slowly across from her. His hands trembled slightly, resting on the table. I let you down. Her eyes shimmered, but not from tears. You buried me, Jungkook, not just with silence, but with denial. You looked into cameras and told millions everything was fine while I was screaming into a void. He bowed his head. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was protecting myself. I was scared of what it meant to be weak in front of them, of not being perfect, of being the reason someone got hurt. She leaned in. You were the reason. That landed like a punch. He didn't deny it. He didn't excuse it. I know. The tension sat between them like an open wound. No bandage, no antiseptic, just air and truth and time. I kept everything, she said, reaching into her bag. The messages, the threats, the footage, even the contracts they forced me to sign, I have it all. Jungkook looked up stunned. You kept it. I wanted to forget, she admitted. But some part of me knew I'd need proof, because one day you'd either save me or finish what they started. She slid a flash drive across the table. His hand hovered above it. What's on it? Everything. Jungkook closed his fingers around the drive, like it was a ticking bomb. They'll come after you, he said. They already did. He couldn't meet her eyes. I'm sorry. No, she said. You don't get to say that, not until this is over, not until they say your name instead of mine. That night, the drive was placed in Yoongi's hands. His studio was soundproof, impenetrable. He loaded the files onto his private system, eyes narrowing as folders opened. Video files, emails, legal documents. A photo of Minhyuk with her, arm draped around her shoulders, too tight, her eyes distant. Surveillance footage from the HYBE hallway. Audio recordings of the internal meetings where they discussed how to manage the optics. Jimin stood behind Yoongi, fists trembling. They knew, all of them. Namjoon stared at the wall. We were just puppets. No, Yoongi muttered. We were currency. The next morning, the drive was duplicated and encrypted. A digital insurance policy. Taehyung reached out to a trusted journalist, one known for integrity, not spectacle. Hoseok coordinated with legal counsel independent of HYBE's web. For the first time in a decade, the 7 of them were working not as idols, but as survivors of something bigger than fame. The plan was simple. Expose the network. Name the names. Show the world what really kept the machine running. And it began that evening, live, uncensored, on a streamed broadcast across YouTube and VLive. No stylists, no stage lighting, no teleprompters. Jungkook sat in the center, flanked by the others. He stared into the camera, heart thundering. My name is Jeon Jungkook, and this is the truth you were never meant to hear. He gestured off-screen. She walked in slowly. Her face still hidden by a mask, her posture rigid, but her voice, when she finally spoke, was clear. My name is Hayoon, and I was silenced. The world watched, millions tuned in, some expected scandal, others expected lies. What they got was far more dangerous. The raw, untamed, unfiltered truth. And once it began, it could never be stopped. The broadcast didn't end. It bled into headlines, into courtrooms, into living rooms across the globe. For 2 hours, Hayoon spoke. She named names. She detailed the manipulation, the threats, the betrayal from those in power. Her voice trembled only once, when she said, I waited 3 years for someone to say I mattered more than their image, and when no one did, I stopped waiting. Jungkook never interrupted. He just sat there, his hands folded, gaze fixed forward, not blinking. When she finished, the silence was deafening. It was the kind of silence that demanded change. Then came the questions. From fans, from the press, from officials and lawmakers. The next morning, Minhyuk was arrested. By the week's end, 2 HYBE executives resigned amid mounting pressure and leaked internal memos. Their statements denied knowledge, but the receipts said otherwise. Investigations were launched. Jungkook's contracts were unsealed. The hidden clauses, the suppression clauses, the moral image preservation fund, code for hush money. Public reactions split like a wound. Some army turned away. Others held fast, saying, we love him not because he's perfect, but because he's human. Jimin stepped forward with a statement of his own. You asked for honesty, we bled it. Yoongi released a track. No warning, no label. Just a beat laced with fury and verses that scorched the very foundation of the industry that made him. Taehyung walked off a variety show mid-recording, after a producer made a joke about idol scandals. Hoseok stood outside the courthouse with Hayoon, holding her hand as she gave her testimony to prosecutors. Namjoon turned down every press interview. He released a single post, let the truth speak, we've spoken enough. And Jungkook disappeared. For days, then weeks. The media called it cowardice. Fans called it healing. Then, 1 month to the day after the broadcast, he reappeared. No cameras, no tour. Just a small letter, handwritten, posted on Bangtan's official site. To those who stayed, and even to those who left. Thank you. I've lived my entire adult life in front of you. I've made you smile. I've made you proud. And now I've made you disappointed. I understand all of that. But the boy who once danced to be loved by the world has grown into a man who can no longer dance if it means betraying what's right. I hurt someone. I failed to protect her. I failed to protect myself. I let silence wear the crown of peace while people bled behind the curtain. I can't undo what happened, but I can promise this. Never again will I sing a lie. Whatever comes next, album or exile, stage or silence, I walk into it as myself. And that will be enough. Jungkook. Months passed. HYBE underwent a complete audit. Artists began renegotiating contracts. Hayoon founded an organization for creative industry survivors, supported anonymously, until she named Jungkook as the seed donor. BTS didn't disband, but they weren't the same. They no longer moved as one illusion. They moved as 7 truths. And in the final show of the year, a surprise appearance. A single spotlight. Jungkook, standing alone, guitar in hand. No choreo, no fireworks. Just a voice. "I thought I had to be perfect to be loved," he said into the mic. "But now I know I just have to be real." He sang a song no one had heard before, not even the members. Raw, quiet, a confession. And when the lights faded, he didn't bow. He looked up and smiled, because he was free.